And we didn't make it up. That was part of the way the program was founded in 1976 at a Lutheran church in St. Louis, Missouri. So, but it's obviously, it's well tested, it's done well, and so that's where we're coming from. Emotional intelligence has been a huge part of my personal and professional life also since the 70s, way before I knew about Stephen ministry. But my training is in social work, and I've worked with children and young families for most of my career. And so I have found that as the field of emotional intelligence has grown and research has been done and writing has been done, that I've grown along with it. And I really feel my whole thought processes, my behaviors, my perspective, pretty much everything about me has grown along with the field of emotional intelligence. I think in a good way, and I hope other people do also. So that's just a brief background of where I'm coming from. So the definition we're using today for emotional intelligence comes from probably the foremost researcher and writer and psychologist on the field. I'm going to call it EI, and that is Daniel Goleman. Are any of you familiar with Daniel Goleman's work? He's got one. Yeah. Have you read it? Have you read any of his books?
Not in full.
Yeah. He's done a lot of writing and stuff too. Yeah. But they are very accessible. You don't have to be a psychologist to understand them. That's one of the things I love about him. And when I first read him in the 90s, and he's done extensive research, huge research projects that he's done with literally hundreds and thousands of people. And he's written over 10 books. And when I first read it, I was like, oh, this is social work, and somebody finally found a way to make money on it. But it's awesome. It's really, really good stuff. So the definition comes from Daniel Goleman. There we go. Would somebody read the definition that can see it well? Read it out loud for us.
The ability to understand, use, and manage our own emotions in positive ways, to relieve stress, communicate effectively, empathize with others, overcome challenges, and diffuse conflict.
I think that's a pretty audacious claim. And I wouldn't be here tonight if I didn't know that it really worked and had seen it in my life and the lives of many. Notice that when we say understand, use, and manage your own emotions, we're not saying change your emotions. I think that's just in general important to note. And also you can note that right in the definition, the benefits of why do we want to do this are there. So emotional intelligence is a major contributor to mental health. Again, well-studied, evidence-based practice, and not just for adults. Based on research conducted for a PhD program at the University of Minnesota, we know that even in preschoolers, the ability to identify, accept, and understand feelings has a major impact on behavior and successful learning. Full disclosure, the author of this next quote is my sister, Dr. Christine Wing. But again, this is research done. Research tells us that less than half of all adults in the U.S. are able to provide a word to describe his or her emotional state at a given point in time. That just blows me away. And yet, we know that emotional intelligence reflected in the ability to describe our states is predictive of many positive life outcomes. And to name just a couple of these positive outcomes are success in employment and success in our human relationships. As far as employment is concerned, this holds true across the board in whatever job you do, whatever field. But Daniel Goleman has noted that he has found that the higher the bar is to enter a job or profession, the more important EI and the ability of EI is in actually achieving success in that profession. So it doesn't matter how high your SAT score or your LSAT score is, or your GRE score or your MCAT score. we all know people who supposedly brilliant minds, but somehow something's got stuck and they can't accomplish what they did, or their human relationships are really lacking. And the difference is the emotional intelligence. And so the more intellectual intelligence you need to achieve at something, the more EI also comes into play. Does that make sense? Okay. Similarly, building and maintaining successful relationships in all areas of lives requires a minimum of EI, and to be truly productive and meaningful, a higher level of EI. Emotions, both ours and others, underlie all relationships in all areas of our lives. To be whether we realize it consciously or not, it's still there. That doesn't mean that we go around in every single relationship and all we do is talk about our feelings, your feelings, my feelings, all that kind of stuff. It means that the awareness of it and understanding the importance of the feelings is what makes the difference in a successful or not successful relationship. Let's see here. Emotional intelligence, another factor, is it fosters resiliency. And by resiliency, we're referring to one's ability to adapt to stressful situations or crises, although these days none of us have many of those, right? Especially our kids. Whether those crises be physical or emotional. Resilience allows us to harness that inner strength that helps us rebound from a setback or challenge. This strength enhances coping with the full range of stressors, and even coping with trauma experience, even from a very early age. We're even talking pre-verbal. So that our preschoolers through older children have wherewithal to weather being teased, to bullied, to experiencing physical injury and illness, and even living through the tsunami of the death of a parent. Dr. Wing writes, again, can someone read that out loud for us? And I'll take a break.
Young children who are able to use words to describe their emotions, thoughts, perceptions, and physical states do well on tasks that measure early ability to self-regulate and problem solve. Brain imaging has shown that when we use a word to describe an emotion, it decreases activity in the part of the brain, the amygdala, where aggression or flight are initiated, and activates the part of the brain where problem solving occurs, the prefrontal cortex.
I'm just going to take a minute to let that sink in a little bit, because I think it's just so profound. Isn't it amazing that our science allows us to measure those things? Okay, so to summarize, emotional intelligence is not a soft skill. It's not about that touchy-feely, nicey stuff. It's really about mental health, successful learning and contributions in work life, successful relationships, resiliency, and engagement versus aggression or withdrawal, and more. So, how do we as parents, grandparents, teachers, neighbors, people connected with the lives of our young ones foster emotional intelligence? And we have to start with ourselves. There's no getting around it. We can't teach what we don't know. So continuous learning about understanding and working with our own emotions. And then, and that starts with what I like to call is the 3 to 5 A's of emotional intelligence. That first thing is awareness. Now, I learned early on that a lot of times when I was feeling an intense emotion, I didn't know it in my head. I thought, oh, I'm just going about my day. I got 1,010 things to do, check them off the list. And, but it was when I became a parent and I saw my baby reacting to something and thinking, what's going on? She's been fed, she's been clothed, she's got a dry diaper, whatever. And she taught me that she was relating to what was going on inside of me. And then I had to learn to check it out in my body. Our body literally keeps the score and tells us, did I have a rumbling in my stomach? Did I have a rapid heartbeat? Did I have a throbbing in my temples? Was I just shaking my foot a lot? What was going on with me? So, short story, and we could talk about this for weeks. Focus in on what's happening and then say to yourself, what am I feeling right now? And that goes way beyond, am I happy, glad, sad, mad, or fearful? As Pastor Ann has written, this is just the tip of the iceberg of other feelings. So when we look at our feelings and when we ask ourselves, which we must do, what am I feeling? We never start with the first one. We start with the feeling, we think about it, we integrate that, we appreciate it, we honor it, and then we say, what else am I feeling? We do the same thing with kids, right? We never stop with the first or second feeling. And then after we process that, we say, what else am I feeling? And I have found that I need to go at least 3 layers, and more importantly, if it's intense feeling, like 5 layers down before I'm really dealing with what's going on. So, and then, again, we don't judge our feelings. I think we probably were all taught, I certainly was taught to judge my feelings. Words like, you don't really feel that way, or you shouldn't feel that way, or are you kidding me? You said that to me, go to your room, you're grounded. Or whatever it is, you don't really mean that, or my mother-in-law is good at this one, better not to talk about that, that's just going to make you feel worse. So whatever it is, we were all steeped in that certain way of training. It's our culture, it's our society. And nobody meant to do us harm by that. But it's something we have to counteract. We have to counteract from ourselves, and we have to help our kids to do. Feelings can be uncomfortable or comfortable, but they're never good or bad. They're never right or wrong. They all have something to teach us, and that's why we go beyond acknowledgement and acceptance all the way to appreciation. Thank you for my sadness, because while I wish I wasn't in the situation that made me sad, I have something to learn, and there's a way that I'm going to grow and I'm going to become more of who I am through the sadness. So, the great thing about emotional intelligence is it's not you're born with it or you're not born with it. It's something that we can learn and develop throughout our lives and at any stages of our lives. It's not set in stone, so we can help our children with it. And we do that because having acknowledged, accepted, and honored our emotional reactions, we then can choose to act in a way that truly coincides with our own best selves. Again, that's not just withdrawal or aggression, it's not fight or flight. And we all know this with children. We can get into this later too. Children show their emotions in different ways than adults do, and that's really important to honor and be aware of too. So then we work on ourselves so we can assist our children. And remember as we're doing this that each and every one of us, having been created by divine love in the divine image, and that includes our feeling, emotional selves, we can spend a long time studying all the ways that Jesus brought out the importance and rightness of feelings in his life, in his death, in his resurrection, and in his ascension. We're just going to leave it there for now, so I'm going to turn it over to Ann to take it away.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's so wonderful to see you all here, especially people who aren't typically in the adult forum. So I guess where I'd like to start is tell me, and you can just shout these out, where in your body do you feel a particular emotion? So like when you're angry, where do you feel that in your body?
Head.
Head?
Stomach.
Stomach?
Stomach, upset stomach.
Like
yes.
a churning
Totally.
in your stomach? Anybody else have another answer?
Throat.
What?
Throat.
Throat. Okay. Yeah, like maybe you really want to yell at somebody, but you're keeping it inside. Back here?
Chest.
Chest, like a tightness, maybe. Where do you feel anxiety? Nervousness? Is that also here?
Yep.
Where else? Shoulders, I feel it right here. These muscles become like rocks. Anywhere else?
Breathing.
Breathing, like a fast breathing or even difficulty breathing. Where do you feel like when you are elated or happy or joyful? What does that feel like in your body?
I'm on a cloud.
On a cloud. What a good description. Like a lightness. What else?
I can take a deep breath finally.
Take a really deep breath.
Yeah.
Yeah. And kind of maybe let some of this stuff go, right? So feelings are embodied clearly. I say that because sometimes kids don't have the words for feelings, but they can tell you maybe what's going on in their bodies. Almost every morning, my son gets up and lies on the couch at school days. This never happens on Saturday or Sunday. School days, lies on the couch and just moans. Like that's one of these, like, And even sounds like that are a clue to a feeling. Something going on in your body. How many of you have felt sick and then realized what's really making me sick is not the bad fish or a flu virus or whatever. It's that I have a big project I have to get done, or I'm up against a deadline, or this important relationship that I have in my life is going wrong right now. Like at first it's, oh man, what did I eat? Or what, and then you realize later that your body is telling you something else. Hi, Corinne. Hi. She's telling us something too. So I have a friend who likes to say that feelings always come out sometimes sideways, which means that they're going to come out whichever way they can, and not necessarily in a healthy way, not necessarily in a way that expresses the actual feeling that is happening, but instead is aggression towards someone else. So what I'd like you to do is turn to someone, this is what I like to do first. So here's our list: alert, comfortable, nervous, refreshed, strong, tense, weak, weary, apathetic, bad, bored, confident, despairing, detached, empty, fearful, free, good, guilty, peaceful, amazed, concerned, confused, hesitant, interested, reluctant, suspicious, and for those of you with 10-year-old boys at home, grossed out, blah, right? Like that's a feeling word. Off. I'm off today. Wiped out. Mopey. I'm out of it. I'm just kind of out of it. Or so turn to someone with whom you do not share a household and talk about a time this week when you felt 2 or 3 of these different emotions. So somebody you don't live with, because maybe they already know all about it. And talk about a time when you felt one of these. So not happy, sad, glad, angry, but something a little more precise.
It's okay to get up and move around if you need to find somebody that...
Or turn around, or You all like introduce yourselves to each other, right? You know a name now? Okay. How many of you had already processed the feelings that you shared? How many of you had already processed the feelings that you shared internally, like with your own self?
process them well? Or?
How many of you tried to process the feelings that you shared internally with your own self?
Tried.
Already tried. How many of you tried to process the feelings that you shared with another person before you came to this room? Less, far less of you, right? So we have a lot of internal processing going on. Did any of you, did anyone learn something about what you were feeling or the situation that you went through in talking about it out loud? Did you learn something new or sometimes when you talk it out loud, you come to a realization that maybe you hadn't before? Did that happen to anybody in this process? Right? So the internal processing is great. External processing is great too, right? I have to do the internal stuff before I can talk about it with somebody else to get it straight in my own head and name something. Otherwise, it's just kind of a babbling conversation with my partner or friend or whomever. But there's value in both of those things, clearly. How do you know when you're interacting with another person, and maybe you're just talking about work or life or work, or what else is there, right? in interacting with someone, have you ever realized that maybe you're talking about this, but they are feeling this, and it is coming out at you? Has that ever happened to you before? So maybe, let me think of a situation. As a pastor, there have been times when people have come up to me and said things like, I really didn't like the sermon you preached on. Or I didn't, why do we play these hymns and not other hymns? Or, the council, why don't they publish those minutes? Is this a secret, something that's going on? So a real strong reaction to something that another person might say, hey, talk to me about the hymns that we sing on Sunday morning. What are those all about, right? So somebody comes up to me and they're talking about one thing, but it's clear that something else is underneath all of that. Does that make sense? And that's when feelings come out sideways, right? Has that ever happened to anybody, and are you willing to share? Yes?
I think, a lot of times just in a married relationship,
Your spouse isn't here.
Right, well.
But you are being recorded.
We've had this conversation, so you're talking about helping me dry the dishes, but it's not about the actual drying the dishes. It's you didn't support me when I was, having an argument with our son, or it's not the immediate. That's just the catalyst or the tipping point. The last the straw that breaks the camel's back. And what you're talking about is that immediate, but really it's other things that have happened and things that you have internalized and not communicated. Whereas if you communicate those throughout the time, it doesn't get to that explosion point.
So you're fighting about the dishes, but it's not really about the dishes. So here's the fight, here are the feelings that are coming out, but what's really going on is up here, right? And sometimes the person whose feelings are coming out sideways are very aware of that, Most of the time they're not. And they're sure they're right and that you're wrong. And I just bring that up to talk about the complexity of all of this and how one of the things that we talk about in this lesson with the Stephen ministers is that it's okay to feel whatever you're feeling. Feelings aren't good or bad, but you get to choose about how you respond or react. And that goes with kids too. Sometimes I have a daughter at home who is a feelings barometer. She's very sensitive, and if there's something going on under the surface, she knows it and she acts out accordingly. It took me a long time to learn that that's actually what was going on, and that disciplining her in that, super unhelpful, right? As much as I wanted to be like, I'm your mother, go to your room, like,
Does
you will, yeah.
Does she pick up on that with other family members too?
Yeah.
Or something? Yeah.
So like, Thanksgiving dinner, it's an awesome place to like, pull up right? But it's all the relationship dynamics that are going on, and somehow she picks up on that, right? And she acts out accordingly. So the layers of complexity here, right? Your own awareness, your own ability to process, your own ability to speak that, the other person's ability to realize that what they're talking about isn't really what they're talking about. And then to deal with people who feel that that's what's going on, but maybe don't have the words and are behaving in a particular way. Like, this is so complex, and that's why we wanted to talk about all of this. And I had one more question with you all, which is, two more actually. Talk to the same person you talked to before about someone that you dealt with this week. If you have a child at home, please choose that person. If you don't, it can be anybody that you interacted with this week. When you could tell that they were feeling one of these things, or you thought that they were feeling one of these things, or they told you that they were feeling one of these things, and what that was like, and maybe how they were behaving, or how you knew that they were feeling fearful, or how you knew that they were feeling bored. So, not about you this time, but about somebody that you interacted with this week with your partner. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Sue looked particularly animated while she was talking, so I wanted to see if she would share.
I look animated all the time, so people make fun of me for all my voices. But I was relating to what Ann said before, and I shared a little bit with Cleppe about having a child who's now an adult and lives with us, who has the emotional radar all the time. So if I walk in and I'm like, oh, I'm kind of in a bad mood, I can just see this. It's just, just giving me the eye to see how am I going to respond, how can I react to Mom. Often she'll be like, so what's going on? What happened today? And I'm like, I'm not ready to talk about it. So then she'll go to her room, and it's constantly having to be aware when I walk in the door that she's aware of how I feel if I don't say a word. And it's a good thing. It also can be a little bit draining at times because you just want to walk in and be you and not worry about putting on that, happy face. So it's a blessing and a challenge. Because I do have faces. So
Can anybody else briefly share a story with us?
I can.
Yeah.
So I have a 5-year-old.
Tell us your name.
I'm Sarah.
Okay.
My daughter is Claire. She's downstairs in Sunday school. So I have a 5-year-old. We have a 5-year-old. This is my husband, Matt. And she is a wonderful little girl. She is such a good listener at school. She follows her teacher's directions. She does all the things, but she can only do that for so long. And so when she gets home from school, it's got to come out some way, and it comes out through not listening and being defiant and, you know, throwing her toys or pushing her sister. She's a little sister. And Thursday this week we had our like pinnacle of emotions coming out. So, you know, we talked about like naming our emotions, and we emailed her teacher, and then that night we had a family dinner together about how we want to feel and how we can work through some of those feelings. So we had a good morning on Friday, but
But that's amazing with a 5-year-old, right?
yeah.
5-year-old. And this happened with my kids too. Like we'd go to parent-teacher conferences and they'd be like, I love your daughter. Your son is so great. He's a real leader. He listens. I can always count on her to do. And I'm like, who are you
Which kid?
talking about?
Which kid are you talking about? Exactly.
It's like, you know who my daughter is, right? And it's because, I'm sure you all know this, if you can fall apart in front of somebody, they're a safe person.
Yes.
Right? So you can't fall apart at school. And I don't know how kids that are super, super young figure that out, but they do. So they come home and they like let it all hang out, but that means that they feel like they can do that in front of you. Sometimes I wish they didn't feel like they could do that in front of me. And I had somebody tell me, like, when you really need to be worried is when that behavior shows itself at school, like in a place where, because then that's the safe place to let it all hang out and not necessarily with you. So Beth is up. I have these books at my house. This one is called In My Heart, a book of feelings, and it describes different feelings. This is a journal that helps kids process their feelings and have good self-esteem. My mistakes help me grow, you know. So these are some of the resources I have. We're going to be having a couple more sessions on this subject. If you have stuff like this at home, would you bring it or write it down or share it with us so that we can have like a great collection of resources for one another? That'd be great. So Beth, you're all right.
I'm Beth Brown. I am the mom of 4 grown girls, so I get girls. But I've also worked in the schools my entire life. I was a speech pathologist, and so I've kind of worked with kids the majority of the time, like 3, 4, 5 elementary school, and the last 9 years I've been in a middle school, and that is a whole different can of worms. And talk about emotions. You get them all. So I'm just here to kind of share some of the things that I've noticed, some things that have worked at home, that have worked at school. I think Anne stated it so, like, this, you need to have a safe zone where kids feel comfortable to talk, and it all starts with feeling safe in your own emotions before the kids are going to pick up on that too. And as a speech language pathologist, I often said to parents, like, you know what? They don't have the words, it's going to be their actions. That's how they're going to tell you what they're feeling lots of times. It might be an acting out at the end of the day. It might be totally shutting down at the end of the day. It might be slamming a door. It might be a push to another child or things like that. And I think we so desperately want to understand, and I mean, I think from birth on, like when you're trying to figure out the emotion that's attached with a cry or a smile or, you know, a fussy stomach or things like that. We're always like trying to do that. And I think that it's just so important to know that the words aren't always going to be there. And the more we can do to help build those words and the vocabulary and the environment where kids can talk about those things and feel comfortable with them is something that we want to do. And I know one thing for me, and hearing your story just made me chuckle. Like, when I would come home from work, and I had spent an entire day with kids, and I would come home to my 4 kids, I would send to the TV and I would sit in the kitchen and read through junk mail. Like, we just separated because I knew I could say things or do things because I was just wiped. And that was the emotion. I'm wiped out. I need my time to myself before we can come back together. And even now, the kids, this will date me, but they always say, that's why you always sent us to watch Barney for a half an hour. Now it's more on screens and things like that. But I think that's one thing to realize, that when kids come home after a busy day, they do need time to decompress, let go of things, and it's probably not the best time in the day to say, how was your day? I mean, some kids might be okay with that, but a lot of kids just they want to be done. And I know, even in the field of education, it's like, well, they come home and they do homework, and it's like, oh, I get it. Like, you want to clear it out, but it might not be the best time to allow that to happen. So I think that's just a good, and some kids spill it out no matter what. They're going to tell you everything, but you might not be in a position to handle what they're telling you at that time. And it's okay to say, Mom needs some time to just take some time for herself, or to go to a different room, or do whatever you need to do, and obviously keep your kids safe and do those things. But I think too, even maybe it isn't screen time that's the first thing that's the go-to for them. They're on screens all day long. And there's great stuff about screen time. There's really some yucky stuff about screen time too. And I think, not to feel pressured by, well, they do that at this house, so they seem like a good mom, maybe I should be doing that. Kind of go with your inner gauge on what's going on. And to realize that behaviors are emotions, words are emotions, all of that. And one thing that I have, in my professional career and in my personal career, have found to be just a part of who I am, is always like, how are you doing? What's going on today? And just having that totally open-ended, tell me one thing you did today. And at first it's like, well, I didn't do anything, or something like that. But even, with kids that I work with who you're trying to establish that relationship with, that's just a part of how we're going to interact. And let me tell you what I did today. So it's not always what they did, but you're also sharing a small piece of you with them. Like, I can say, oh, I've had a rotten day. I overslept, or I spilled coffee on myself on my way to work, or things like that. So they hear not only great things that are happening, but things that are struggles and that have an impact on you. I wiped out with my dog Harley, and I had to deal with that. But always letting them know that you have emotions and they have. And sometimes it's like, I don't have anything to say. And not having anything to say at a time is also an okay feeling. So being open to all of that. Lots of times when I had groups of kids, or in our family, when we had dinner time, we would talk about something good that happened today and something that was not so good that happened today. And I have always found that so insightful, because sometimes my good was someone else's not so good. And sometimes, it just gives you an insight into how they are processing their world. And it's a safe place to talk. And so then, if that's just a part of who you are and how you interact with your kids, when tough emotions do come up and big situations do happen, they know that it's the safe zone. If you, just go about your day and all of a sudden, one day someone blows up and you're like, oh, what's going on? They're not going to be real open to talking about it if they haven't been sharing all along. Like, you only want to know my bad? You don't want to know my good? So I think that those are things, that we can go with. With kids, kind of a fun way to do it is everyone is so exposed to emojis, like even having that on your refrigerator, like they can point to pictures of how they feel, and that just expands it. And even if they don't have the words, you get a good idea how they're feeling by what they point to. And then, as the adult in it, we can start adding labels to stuff and saying, oh yeah, that was bad, but it really wasn't like bad. I just was feeling like, kind of like there was nothing I could do to change it. I was kind of like hopeless. And so over time, building that vocabulary for them so that as they grow and mature, they've got the tools to deal with it. Another thing that I have always found really helpful is within books and movies, if you're reading out loud together, best thing you can do for any child, regardless of their age, is using the characters in a book. Like, oh, whoa, how do you think they felt when that happened? And then you can expand it. What makes you feel that way? Or have you ever felt that way? Maybe they haven't. That's okay too. And the same with movies. I mean, I think lots of times we put them on and it's kind of like a zone out. As a mom of grown kids, now I sit and I'm like, I never watched that whole movie. Like, I was like, in and out, they say something, I'm like, oh, wow. But using those times when you can to engage in conversations. And as that happens, those feelings just become more natural, more acceptable for you, more acceptable for them. It helps change the external processing of an emotion to a more internalized one where they can kind of think about it and work through it and deal with it. I know we have only a couple minutes because a lot of you guys are leaving to pick up kids. Another thing is, as a parent, sometimes I would look at a situation my kids were in and I would be like, oh wow, like, gosh, are they lonely? Are they sad? Like, I would project my emotion of what I thought it should be onto them. And I think the more we can hold back, like I have a very overt, has to be around people all the time. Another one that is such an introvert. And I would always be like, what do you mean you don't want to go out with someone on a Friday night? Like, get out of here. And it's like, that was the safe zone for them. And that is what gave them comfort. And to allow those personalities to develop and go. A couple, totally just tried and true that have worked for me is, when kids have huge emotions and they're really struggling with younger kids, I always say, take my hand, squeeze it as hard as you can. Get rid of that yuck thing that's in your brain. Squeeze me harder. And I'd be like, going on through the whole thing. But in that process of them physically releasing that anger or whatever it is that they were feeling, by the end of it, we often ended up laughing. And with kids as they got older, like 3rd, 4th, 5th graders, and they kind of get in their head with stuff, and I would always say, okay, I get it. That's just, it's not good. It doesn't feel good. I'm like, let's just pull it out of our brain. And physically would go through the action of pulling and pulling and pulling and take it now, squish it up and throw it away and throw it in a garbage can, throw it out the window, wherever it went. But to deal with some of those strong negative emotions, that physical act of doing something also helped them to mentally just be able to it's gone. It's like taking a deep breath. But for them, it was just a more physical experience that went along with it. So those would be a couple things that I have found. And like I said, that sometimes our big deals are their little deals. Their little deals, or their big deals are our littles, and our littles are the big. I'm getting the words moved. But to kind of keep that in mind and know that each day is a fresh start. and we've got a chance to build on it and grow with it and just continue that journey. And it's okay for them to know that I don't always have the answers. That's a tough one. I can't deal with it, but we can work on it together. And I think building that relationship where emotions are just a part of life, a huge part of life that affect everything that we do and where we go and how we interact with others, and, you know, acknowledging like, oh yeah, so-and-so probably maybe they didn't really mean what they said, and it definitely hurt. And just adding that component to kids' lives, because they deal with so much. They're awesome little individuals and total sponges, and just what makes the world a great place. So, in a nutshell, thanks. Just in time.
Any questions for Beth?
Yeah, I got a question. I've got a very sweet wife, and she loves the Packers. To watch them men beat each other up. And I'm just wondering if that kind of aggression.
You tell me, Carl.
I'm serious.
Yeah.
I got some middle school
Yeah.
grandkids now.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want them playing football.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's kind of justified anger, aggression. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Like, is that a good thing for them to do?
Yeah.
I wish I
struggle
had
with
an
that
answer.
right now.
You know what? I think there are tons of good things about those sports, and that it does build a team spirit, and it's cooperation, and it's all those things. It is aggressive. And I think it's okay to say, like, it's hard for me to watch you. Like, I don't want you to get hurt, and I don't want you to, like, beat up on someone. But that's why they give them pads, I guess. I don't know.
I'm a Little League coach.
What?
I'm a Little League coach.
Oh yeah, you see lots of stuff.
One situation I remember, he struck out. He's a 10-year-old or 11-year-old, something like that.
Yeah.
And he was crying.
Yep.
My wife was waving him on down. I was third base coach. And I sat there, put my arm around him. I said, "Man, don't feel bad because I've struck out many times."
Yeah. I think sometimes it's just sitting next to him and just letting it be. Yeah, I had a brother that was a hothead. Like, he was always physical.
Parents of young kids, I know you're running off, and we just want to say thank you very much for coming today. We really did intend this to be for everybody who interacts with kids, but want to connect you with some information and with one another. And you have one little piece of homework. We're going to have like a house, like a box that looks like a house out in the Commons in the next couple months. It's for your questions, your thoughts, your queries, and things that you want to address, or more information you'd like to know, things you want to know more about, and drop your thoughts in there so that in our next time together we can respond to that and have some more conversation that meets your needs, and just helps this be a good place for you to spend some time sharing with one another. So thanks for coming today.
Thanks for coming.